How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I've got a very special deck profile for you guys today. We're going to be looking at one of the most unique decks I have ever covered on this channel. We're going to be looking at Turn Skip or JumboChessmon. So this deck is not my original idea. This is a brew that has been kind of floating around for the last couple of formats ever since the Chessmon cards were released in BT14. However, this is such a unique take on this archetype. This is a brew that is designed basically to steal turns from your opponent by forcing them to attack and basically forcing them to provide you with extra memory. It is super unique and it's super hard to describe, so we're just going to go through the cards here and talk about how the interactions work, because this is an incredibly fun deck. If you are looking to build something cheap and fun to play at your locals, this is absolutely a deck you should consider. It's got a little bit of a learning curve in terms of making your plays optimally, but it's very aggressive, it goes wide, it's very defensive, has a lot of blockers. It is very, very cool. There's so many fun interactions to talk about, so let's go ahead and get into the deck profile. To begin with, of course, we're going to be looking at our eggs. We are going to be playing 4 copies of Pagumon. Pagumon is a very standard egg where on deletion, you are going to be able to look at the top card of your deck. If that card is a black Digimon, you can, of course, then add it to your hand. This is, as I mentioned, a very defensive deck. We actually want our bodies to be dying every once in a while, so Pagumon is actually a no-brainer. It actually has a lot of synergy for this deck, surprisingly, of course. Now, as we get into our rookies, we're going to immediately be starting to talk about our various Chessmon cards. Now, the Chessmon cards can be a little bit wordy, so I'm going to do my best to summarize. I'll be putting the full card descriptions on the screen for you guys. But the Chessmon cards basically come in yellow and black foils of one another. There is a black suit, which are the black chess pieces from the game, and of course we have yellow chess pieces for the white chess pieces in the game. So each of our Chessmons are going to share certain effects in common and are going to have certain foils that each of the evolutions will share in common as well. The black variations are going to have blocker. The white variations are going to have the inheritable of reboot. Now this again is going to be shared amongst all of the various Chessmon cards leading up into the megas. So ultimately we will be playing 4 of each. These guys are going to be very vital to the overall game plan of our deck. The PawnChessmons are also fairly unique as rookies in the sense that they do have a Digivolution cost of 1. So in order to Digivolve from our egg, you are going to have to spend a memory, which in some cases is going to be okay, but that is something you'll want to keep in mind as you're making your plays throughout the game. Now I am playing another rookie. We're going to be playing 4 copies of Gotsumon, also from BT14. This Gotsumon is 3 to play, has 1000 DP, and of course, blocker again. He has an on-deletion effect, where if it is the opponent's turn, you can reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, add a black card among them to your hand, and put the rest on the bottom. Gotsumon is very good as a consistency tool. He's also very good as a disposable blocker. We are all about having disposability in this deck, as you'll come to find out. As I mentioned, all of the Chessmon cards do have on-deletions to play out other Chessmon, so we are totally okay with our stuff dying for the most part. But a Gotsumon with a Pagumon underneath it is already going to be giving us quite a bit of card advantage, being able to use Pagumon to add a card and Gotsumon to add a second. So right off the bat, this card is pretty decent as far as card advantage goes. Gotsumon is an easy card to include as a second rookie in this particular list. Now moving up into our champions, we are going to be playing 4 each of the 2 different versions of KnightChessmon. Just like our PawnChessmons, again, our black versions are going to have blocker, our yellow versions are going to have reboot as an inheritable. And one of the things I forgot to mention is, as far as the on-deletion effects go, our Chessmons that are yellow dominant have a deletion effect that only works on your turn. Our black dominant Chessmons are having an effect that is only functional on the opponent's turn. That is a subtlety to the effect that you may overlook your first couple of games, so just make sure you do keep that in mind. It does actually matter when these Chessmon are being deleted, so make sure you are playing around that ability properly. But other than that, these KnightChessmon are pretty much the same as their PawnChessmon brethren. They do not have an ability to play out things of higher level, but they can at least play out other KnightChessmon or PawnChessmon on deletion. So very, very nice there. Next, we're going to have the spicy tech of Sephirothmon. Now, Sephirothmon is a fairly expensive hybrid, but that's okay. We are using him for his on-Digivolution ability. He is able to Digivolve onto Tamers, but when Digivolving, you basically are taunting one of your opponent's Digimon. And that, again, is going to be a very common theme, and is going to be one of the mechanics that lets this deck do what it wants to do. So Sephirothmon, when digivolving, basically choose one of your opponent's Digimon. At the start of their next main phase, that Digimon must attack immediately. This is going to force that attack before your opponent has a chance to do anything with their turn outside of just promoting from raising. So basically it's going to force them to play into our interaction right off the bat. Those taunt effects are absolutely brutal and can absolutely steal games. And the last champion that I'm going to be running is a single copy of Mekanorimon. He's going to be that same Infiniblocker body that he has always been, but he can be played out from sources in this particular list. So he is a pretty high synergy piece in that regard. I'm opting to play one just because he is very powerful, and despite all of the other blockers that we have, obviously Mekanori has a unique niche, so we're going to be making use of that. Now that's going to do it for our level 4s. Let's go ahead and get into our level 5s. I'm going to be playing only 3 copies of RookChessmon. Now I am choosing to omit BT14 altogether. We are just going to be playing our copies of Rook in our level 5 slots. So he is going to be the black dominant version of the Chessmon line, so he is going to have that blocker, and of course the same on deletion on the opponent's turn effect. RookChessmon is basically, again, going to be just one of the facilitators of our combo turns. We'll get into those as we talk about our Tamers. That's where a lot of those kind of interactions reside. But RookChessmon is going to be it for that. We are playing 3 copies in total of Mamemon. Now this Mamemon is on play or when digivolving to reveal the top 5 cards of your deck. You can play a Tamer with a play cost 4 or less among them without playing the cost. The rest go to either the top or bottom of the deck in any order. He also does have a relevant inheritable, where when you play another Digimon by an effect, one of your Digimon gains blocker until the end of your opponent's turn. As I mentioned, we are going to be playing quite a few Digimon by effects thanks to our Chessmon cards, so that is absolutely a possibility. And of course, the other big thing that Mamemon does is play out those Tamers. This is a deck that is very centralized around the Tamers that it plays, so being able to find those and cheat them into play is, of course, going to be big-time value for us. So, going to be playing 3 copies of Mamemon, not more than that, just because he is a solid black card, not a black and white card, and that is important as we'll talk about a little bit later. But the last ultimate that we're going to be playing is brand new in BT14. That is going to be 2 copies of the new Knightmon. Now, many of you looked at this card and probably thought to yourself, that is some pretty awesome Lord Knightmon support. Nah, this is Chessmon support right here. So Knightmon is 7 to play, 7,000 DP, and 4 to digivolve. He has blocker, and an on-play when digivolving effect, one of your opponent's Digimon gets minus 3,000 DP for the turn for each of your Digimon. Very, very nice removal. He also has an inheritable for all turns. Whenever another Digimon attacks, you can play a yellow or black level 3 Digimon from your hand without paying the cost. So again, another nice convenient way of spamming the board, putting out lots of blockers. This is a very hard deck to penetrate through if it has time to set up. So being able to do this on both turns means that if you are attacking on your own turn with something else, you will get the trigger, and if your opponent is attacking on their turn, again, you will get the trigger. So this is an easy way to spam a ton of small bodies onto the board. We have plenty of targets. And yeah, that is going to do it as far as our ultimates go. Knightmon is honestly a really sweet addition to this deck, being able to lower tall attackers so they die to our blockers, or simply just spot removing small bodies off the board. We do accumulate quite a few bodies very quickly, so Knightmon is going to be great at gap filling there. Being black and yellow, of course, also means we'll get those synergies that we're going to be talking about very shortly. Now, getting into our megas, this is where things really do get spicy. I love when decks branch out of their designed archetype, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing with our megas. So our primary mega of choice is actually going to be 4 copies of JumboGamemon. Now, this card is 13 to play, 13,000 DP, and 5 to digivolve. It is expensive. But for that cost, you get a blocker, and on the opponent's turn, whenever an opponent's Digimon attacks, you can play a level 5 or lower Digimon card from this Digimon's Digivolution sources without paying the cost. So basically, anytime your opponent attacks, you will already be able to cheat out any of the bodies from this card's sources. All of our cards that we have here from our lower levels, all of them are going to qualify. So we can cheat out our Knightmons, our Mamemons to get the on-play effect. We can get blockers through our Chessmon pieces or Gotsumons, Mekanorimons. We have lots and lots of options. But the big reason that this is going to be our payoff is how this is going to interact with our Tamer suit. But before we get into talking about our Tamers, we do have one other mega that I'm running, and that's going to be a single copy of QueenChessmon. Now, QueenChessmon is going to be a nice way to close the game out a little bit sooner if you need to, but it's also a really solid defensive wall. It's 11 to play, 12,000 DP, 4 to digivolve, but can digivolve from a Digimon with Chessmon in its name for a cost of 3. This is a black dominant Chessmon card, so it is going to have blocker, but it has an all turns effect where if a Digimon with Chessmon in its name is deleted, you can unsuspend this Digimon. The fact that this is all turns means that this is going to be not only spammable blocking, being able to unsuspend and block repeatedly if your opponent keeps swinging, but it also means that when attacking, as long as she survives the attack that she is sent in on, if you have other Digimon with Chessmon in their name able to swing as well, you can potentially get extra attacks. That's how she's going to be helping us to close the game out if we need to. Even though JumboGamemon is kind of our primary combo enabler, QueenChessmon is going to give us the opportunity to kind of pivot and end the game if we reach that point as well. So kind of having that plan B is going to be very important if our opponent is able to stop our primary play. Speaking of our primary play, it is now time to talk about the reason this deck is so cool and so much fun, and that is our Tamer suit. So we are going to be playing in total of 8. We are playing 4 copies of Miki and Megumi. These are the Chessmon dual Tamers. 4 to play, and have an on-play effect where you can play a Digimon with PawnChessmon in its name from your hand without paying the cost. Also has an all-turns effect when you play a 2-color black and yellow Digimon. By suspending this Tamer, draw a card and gain a memory. So this Tamer is basically going to make sure that anytime we are playing any of our 2-color Digimon, so we have PawnChessmons, of course, KnightChessmons, RookChessmon, and our Knightmon is also going to qualify. Anytime we play any of these 2-color cards, we can suspend this Tamer to make the play cost cheaper, or to simply gain memory if they're being played off of effects. Now, since a lot of our Chessmon pieces are going to be able to play out other Chessmon pieces on deletion, that means if our opponent is swinging into our board state and our chess pieces die, and we are able to play out smaller ones, that means then we can potentially be gaining lots of memory, drawing lots of cards, and stealing the turn back. This is where the deck's primary win condition and primary game plan comes into play. We actually have 4 other copies of a Tamer that does something similar in the form of Keenan Crier. Now, Keenan Crier has an on-play effect. Your opponent may trash a Tamer or option card in their hand. If they don't, you gain a memory and again draw a card. Now, he is only 3 to play, which means if they choose not to use this ability when you play it from your hand, he will only cost you 2. However, if they check this from security, this effect will still go off, meaning that if they choose not to do it after checking him on an attack, you will get to gain a memory right away, which is pretty cool. But he also has an opponent's turn effect. When an effect plays a Digimon, by suspending this Tamer, gain a memory. So basically we have 8 Tamers where anytime we are playing Digimon by effects, we are going to get to steal free memory from our opponent. So let's say that we have our JumboGamemon in play. The opponent then attacks, we can then play out any of our bodies. As long as it is a 2-color body, we can suspend our dual-color Tamer here, and any of the bodies, solid black or otherwise, we can also suspend Keenan. So basically, anytime our opponent is twitching, we are basically able to suspend these Tamers and gain a ton of memory. Ideally, we want to be using taunt effects like Sephirothmon, or the very first of our option cards, which is going to be Laplace's Demon at 4 copies, to force our opponent to attack before they're ready. If we are able to choke them to a small amount of memory and then force them to attack at the start of their turn, with JumboGamemon in play, we would then be able to play out one of our bodies, gain a ton of memory, and potentially take the turn right back from them, while also giving ourselves an extra body in play to aggress with or build up an even thicker defense. So that is kind of where the overall game plan of this deck is coming from. It's super, super interesting. It's very unique and very different, and will absolutely catch people off guard if you take this to a local event. Now, there are 2 more cards that we're running, and that's going to be, again, a new addition from BT14. I'm choosing to play 2 copies of Defense Training. Defense Training is going to help alleviate some of our very expensive Digivolution costs, while also finding some of our vital pieces. The only non-black card the deck has that we are not able to grab from Defense Training is, of course, going to be Keenan, who can be grabbed off of Mamemon. So, ideally, we want to have plenty of cards that can help us search out our combo pieces. If our opponent checks any copies of our Tamers in our security, that is such a huge boon for us, especially since both of them have the capacity to immediately gain us memory advantage, where Keenan has the on-play to, gain the memory and draw if your opponent doesn't discard a Tamer or option, but our dual-color Tamer will also have the option of playing out upon Chessmon immediately, which triggers all of our other dual Tamers and Keenans that are in play. So all of the memory gain is pretty absurd, pretty obscene, and yeah, it's a very fun, very unique take on the Chessmon archetype. I love that it leans so heavily on cards that were clearly not designed for the Chessmon archetype. I think those decks are extremely fun to experiment with and just see where people's creativity takes them. So yeah, that is going to about do it for this deck profile. I, again, highly recommend that if you guys are looking for something fun to try at your locals, give this deck a run. Obviously, it's going to have a very difficult time playing against decks like specifically Pagumon, where they are going to keep the turn until they have passed you at least 3 memory. That kind of spits in the face of the kind of memory-stealing game plan that we have here, but other than that, this deck will absolutely catch most other archetypes off balance if they don't know how to properly handle it. So give it a try, have some fun, see if you can find some other cool tech options that you can play in here, and yeah, that is going to about do it. Thank you all again for joining me. Hope you all have a great rest of your evening. Once again, I am an avid herpetologist. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Leave a comment down below, and I will see you all next time.